African ideas and innovations will shape the future of the world. And so we must invest in the African ingenuity and creativity, which will unlock incredible economic growth and opportunities, not only for the people of the 54 countries that make up this diverse continent, but for the American people and people around the world.
And that was the Vice President of the United States of America, Kamala Harris, who is in Ghana and has been sharing the US's thoughts, views, dreams for the people of Ghana. Economic partnership, trade, support in terms of fighting against extremists who are invading the sub-region, the empowerment of women in our country, and then as well investment in our digital space. That, she says, is her focus in Ghana. She has so far spoken about issues to do with the economy. She has promised that some $100 million would be given to 3 nations. These nations would be using this money to fight terrorism in the sub-region. There's an additional 139 million, we are told, which will be coming through, God willing, next year. And that's to support our economy. And tonight we'll try to make sense of why she chose Ghana first to start her tour of the continent. What's the significance of her presence in Ghana? Many pundits are already talking about how China's footprints, Russia's footprints are becoming a concern for the United States of America, who seem to be lagging behind, and so they have decided to also start ensuring that they don't lag behind. Is that the real reason for the presence of the Vice President of the United States of America? Tonight we share with you some excerpts of her engagement so far since she started her tour in Ghana. We'll start with her talk about women empowerment and investment in the digital space.
Investment in innovation. Innovation, I believe, to be the pursuit of what can be, unburdened by what has been. Innovation results in one's ability not only to see, but to do things differently. New methods, new products, new approaches, new ideas. We innovate to be more effective and to solve problems. From the invention of new technology to the origin of social movements, innovation has come about by challenging the premise, questioning the status quo, and bold thinking. And so to the young leaders here today, you, by your very nature, are dreamers and innovators. And so to you I say, it is your spark, your creativity, and your determination that will drive the future. We must also be candid about the challenges. From security concerns in the Sahel, to droughts and floods exacerbated by the climate crisis, and barriers to economic growth, both on a macro and micro level. We must tackle these challenges and find ways to accelerate opportunity, growth, and stability. And I believe we must be intentional to make progress in 3 key areas: the empowerment of women, digital inclusion, and good governance and democracy, all of which are a focus of my visit to the continent and going forward, and all of which have the potential to create even more innovation innovation that will unlock new jobs, new industries, and exponential growth.
Vice President of the United States of America, Kamala Harris, sharing her vision for coming to Ghana. That forms the basis for our conversation tonight on Fact Sheet. My name is Samuel Eshun. The show is live on ETV, live on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Our handle is ETV Ghana. You can also follow the conversation on NISIM 95.9 and 100.1. We're taking a short breather. When we come back, I'll introduce you to my guests and then we'll start the conversation. Do kindly stay with us. And welcome back to Fact Sheets live on ETV, live on NISIM 95.9 and 100.1. You can join us on Facebook and share your thoughts, your views, and your comments with us. You can also share the link to groups and platforms that you might be on, whether it's on WhatsApp, Telegram, or any other platforms that you are on. So others may also join the conversation and share their thoughts with us. Tonight, we're joined on the show by Professor Samuel Eshun, who is the head of the Political Science Department, KNUST, and then Professor John Gachi, Dean of the School of Business, University of Cape Coast, to share their thoughts with us. We'll also be joined via phone by Mr. William Amofa, who is a governance expert, for them to join and share their thoughts with us. We will start the conversation from the historical point of view. This will not be the first time we have had a U.S. president sort of join us. We have had former President George W. Bush join us here in Ghana. We have had President Barack Obama, President Clinton, and now Vice President Kamala Harris join us here in Ghana. What is the historical significance of her presence in Ghana? It's good to have you join us tonight, Professor Samuel Eshun.
Thanks for having me, my brother.
I'm hoping you're doing well tonight, sir.
Very well. Yourself?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. The historical significance of the presence of the Vice President of the United States of America.
Permit me to do this quick correction. I'm the former head. My new head is Professor Edward Bringer.
Okay.
Yes, to the substantive question. I am clear in my mind that the visit is also historic in the sense that it isn't every leader, right, of one of the biggest economies, right, in the world that would always or from time to time visit. And just as you have always reflected on, i.e., we have had at least 3 presidents in recent history, and we've also had a vice president coming through. Ghana being a gateway to the continent of Africa and positioning herself as such, even though historically, from the time of independence, we've also known that Ghana has had relationship with the United States of America, even though it held to her own as a non-aligned bloc within the broader historical frameworks of politics and international relations and all that. And non-aligned as we've been, we've also been interested in dealing with all the ideological orientations in the world, be it socialist, capitalist, or any forms of orientation, insofar as that particular state or nation is interested in the common good of our development as a state or a country. We have been able to build such synergies with countries across board, including the United States. It is important to also emphasize the fact that the particular form of leadership, right, at a time, or the form of government at a time, could also have instigated that. And so from time to time, we have seen that within the epochs of our constitutional democratic arrangement, either in the First Republic, where you had the former leader of the black people in America in terms of fighting for equal rights and legislations and all that, in the person of Martin Luther King Jr., had, a visit to the Gold Coast, which had become Ghana eventually. We've had great individuals who were interested in civil liberties and rights and had been interested in the development of the global south, also making their way through to our continent, and for that matter, to Ghana. And so at the time we had had constitutional democratic arrangement, and the democratic arrangement had not failed. We had had the privilege or the occasion to host different, individuals across the board within the continent of the world to visit our land. This is historic, all right, but I want to also find out, among other things, whether it is going to create a continuity sort of, and here whether it's going to be an equal partnership arrangement as they come with some of these visits, or it is to throw largesse and also to make demands that will hang as an apron string around our necks.
But I'm trying to figure out why Ghana would be the first nation she would visit, regardless of all the historical antecedents you've given us. Why would Ghana be the first point of call?
That is why I asked. I also, if I wasn't conjecturing, I also asked whether this visit, historic as it is, whether it is going to really inure to our benefit within the status realm. And then it's going to be within the benefits of Africans that when some of these visits are made, sometimes it is to, first of all, strengthen the interest, the personal or the status interest of that country, geopolitically, economically, socially, and all the other factors. And you understand that the American foreign policy will not seek to throw away its own interest. And so we should not behave like ostriches as if the United States of America is a Father Christmas entity or country or state that just decides to visit Africa or come to Ghana for the sake of it, so that America's interest cannot be overlooked. But what I ask is that, will Ghana also have an equal leveraging on this, level of visit, and what matters that would arise at the end of the day? So yes, I believe, in my contemplation, Ghana has positioned itself strategically. It had held its own together within the Fourth Republic, showed semblances of liberal democratic arrangement as against some illiberal democratic tendencies in some parts of Africa. And so we have tried to strive towards set democratic credentials and gains that would allow for a certain quiet and peace. Our own contribution to the sub-region in terms of security has been spectacular. We have been interested in quiet and peace within the sub-region. We have paid our dues in terms of our armed forces. We have engaged in collaborative exercises and drills and training with the United States forces and other groups. We have been interested in seeking for the quiet and stability of Africa at a subcontinental level in terms of West Africa. But historically also, we have had leaders who have pushed for a certain consciousness of the African unity, and also within that framework, seeking for a certain, space for the African command and also for the progress of the continent.
Right.
And so Ghana, in many respects, if you like, has been that beacon of hope in terms of, if you like, the tendencies for diplomacy and that which would come with it. So diplomatically, I think Ghana has leveraged and has had a lot of strong diplomats in our political leadership.
All right.
And these statesmen over the years have played their role to also strengthen our state in the African sphere and the global political sphere, irrespective of our economic challenges from time to time.
Quickly, I would switch to Professor John Gachi and pick his thoughts from the economic point of view. So far, there's been some pronouncements as to how the US of A wants to help Ghana some $139 million has been mentioned, and this is supposed to aid us in terms of our economy. There's been the mention of some $100 million as well, and this is also to aid us in terms of our security arrangements to protect, our boundaries. And so these are all issues that we will concern ourselves with tonight on Fact Sheet. Once again, you're welcome if you just joined the conversation tonight. We were pleased to hear your thoughts and to read them live on the show. Simply just go to Facebook and look for ETV Ghana and share your thoughts with us. I'll read them in the course of our deliberations and share them with our viewers and our listeners who are monitoring us live on NISIM 95.9 and 100.1. So kindly do share your thoughts with us. We'll quickly dash to Professor John Gachi and then ask him. Okay, it looks like Prof's line has dropped, and so let me just go back to Professor Samuel Eshun and then ask the question about the geopolitics angle of this whole conversation. There are those who hold the view and the thoughts that this whole visit is as a result of the presence of China and the inroads they made into the continent with respect to trade and more. Prof, do you share this view?
It's a difficult one. However, you understand that some few years ago, Goldman Sachs said that by 2020, and beyond, if you like, China would be leveraging to become the lead in terms of the economies of the world. In fact, by 2050, the contemplation is that China would have fully leveraged on that score. And that if you look at a country like China with a huge population like that, it has found ways of finding other shores across the continents of the world to i.e. engage in trade and also to settle their own people and to make a lot of economic gains in that respect. Some have said that China has not directly colonized the continent of Africa before, unlike the Western countries and all that. And so when they have come into the picture, historically, it is to support, if you like, sometimes the struggle that some of the countries in Africa were initially embarking upon against European rule and subjugation. Sometimes, too, they saw them as equal partners in terms of trade arrangement and in terms of development from a certain ideological framework. So, in as much as Africa looked upon the West with suspicion because of the long history of transatlantic slave trade, the long history of economic subjugation, thievery, thrive and theft that the West has for a very long time through an unequal trade arrangements, if you like, siphoned and, if you like, repatriated profits to their home countries. They have not largely seen that with China. And China has leveraged upon that over the years to also find some places under the sun to engage in economic interactions. The nature of the relationship along the lines, as we have seen in our recent history, has not been equal as we have seen or have argued in the past. For example, we have seen China seemingly and also subtly and sometimes directly having some form of colonialism in the sense of economic sense and taking undue advantage of certain territories. And it's been in the news. We have seen the kind of, if you like, rampageous behavior which has gone on even in our country with respect to the unwanted destruction of our forest cover as a result of galamsey, sometimes to the overloading of our economic or business space with Chinese products, Chinese goods, and all that. In fact, if you look at even America today, some few years ago, an American professor came to our university. We had a conference and we were having a conversation. And said, check what I'm wearing from top to down is made in China. And then, if you like, anecdotally said that there isn't any household in US that wouldn't find Chinese product. Few states in the United States will tell you that there are strong Chinese communities here and there, and they are visible in terms of trade, in terms of all the economic arrangements, even in developed jurisdictions like the United States. That is why you find the former President Trump sometimes passing certain comments, unfriendly comments, and trying to create certain schisms from time to time in terms of his own diplomatic relations with China. But that is it. Now it used to be the West in an aggressive sense, but you see China coming in. But Russia has also been there and has openly and cunningly also played its own role, trying to find some place and understand. So there is some level of international politics, international strife involved, looking for space. Earlier, when the Europeans met to share Africa and leading to its eventual balkanization or partitioning, we are not seeing same in the direct reflection in our contemporary times, but we are seeing that in economic zoning, we are seeing that in economic interaction, and so China has also come to take her own, and China has come to do it boldly, and it's doing that across the continent of Africa vehemently. I believe that the Western countries have seen it. China's own alignment with Russia and other, if you like, blocks, collectively, it's also becoming a certain economic force with some degree of ebullience. There is the data, the scientific data, the economic data, really showing how China is spacing to take over in many respects, in many areas.
All right.
And so the United States definitely is not going to sit down. The United States will also be up running to make sure that it's able to cross its T's, dots its I's, and ensure that all the right inflections are in place. But what is significant is that this is also a historical question. States have behaved like that. They have their own allies and interests. And therefore, when they come like this, African countries must understand the nature of their relationship. If you put Ghana before the US, it is like putting an ant before a horse. If you put Ghana before China, it is like dropping a cube in an ocean. It is quite clear that Africa must not go to the table individually, even though they have their own individual interests and all that. We must begin to see a certain subcontinental and continental collectivism in bargaining in such international relations and diplomatic arrangements to make sure that in as much as single-handedly or at an individual status level, countries are bargaining for what they want out of such relationships, they should also stick same through the continental arrangements to ensure that we get better deals within the scheme of things.
You made mention of the global stage and the diplomatic relations and how important they are. Now, what I want us to focus on has to do with the point you made about Ghana being a non-aligned nation. We have on the world stage, China, Russia against the United States of America and some European nations. And this has to do with Ukraine. We are here, and our finance minister just recently was in China. What was it about? It was all about our indebtedness to the Chinese. How does Ghana then play its card in terms of still staying in the middle, but being able to access, for instance, this $139 million, this $100 million that we are being talked about, and again being able to secure the restructuring of our debt to China?
Ghana has been successful with this for a very long time since independence. In the 60s, where we'll get the Akosombo Dam and all that, Nkrumah socialists would go for, if you like, some bilateral arrangements with companies in US and other places and all that. So Ghana has been successful at that in terms of properly aligning within the center and making sure that we are not to the left nor to the right. It is quite clear that we do that because I believe that it is also within nature how we have nurtured ourselves as a people and how we've endeared ourselves to respective countries. And the typical Ghanaian culture, Ghanaian hospitality, Ghanaian notion of humanity, and the level of knowledge over the years in terms of how nuanced we are, even within how we host people, within our traditional courts and all that, has reflected with us even on a continental level and also transcontinental level. So we have not allowed ideological framing per se to throw us entirely off gear. Yes, from time to time we've had serious inflection points with military juntas and military regimes and all that. We have had some degree of dislike and distaste coming about as a result of serious inflection points in our history, so far as coup d'etat, counter coup d'etats, and all that, troubling the kind of opportunities we would have leveraged on as a result, of the quiet and the constitution we had in the past.
Right.
So what I'm trying to say is that historically Ghana has been successful at that, especially when we had quiet and we had constitutional arrangements in making sure that we could deal with institutions elsewhere, both individual level, institutional level, and status level. Without even dealing with the collective state, we've allowed businessmen to come from different countries to have interactions with our businessmen here. We have had different partnerships, both at the local level and the status level. What I mean by the local level is where individual businessmen travel abroad, either to China or to the US and all that. Yes, it can be framed within the broader, if you like, diplomatic relations between the two countries. But what I'm saying is that Ghanaians have not stopped moving about and interacting at individual levels. And the state has not in any way said that this is an Islamic country, this is a socialist country, or this country has illiberal tendencies and therefore we will not engage with that country. Respectfully, that is what diplomacy should be about. If we are going to judge and ensure that the process of development will come about without the maximum gun, then it should be the case that no matter your perspective or your outlook, we should be able to come to the table to have a conversation with you. That is why even one of the most critiqued presidents, the former president of the United States, was named Trump, when he made efforts to deal with, to having conversation with the leader of North Korea, some of us felt that even if it was window dressing or just some dress rehearsal, what was significant within such arrangement is that diplomacy must call for some of these things. And so if Ghana decides to stand within the middle and try to have a relationship with all other persons and manner of persons in states, then I believe that it typifies diplomacy. It is quintessential diplomatic, and that is what Ghana has done historically. And I think that no wonder leaders from the United States and elsewhere would want to come to our shores to have some of these engagements.
All right, let me read a few comments that have come through even as we're having the conversation. We're still working the phone lines to get Professor John Gachi to speak to him. He had earlier joined us via Zoom, but we're having some challenges with the Zoom link, and so we're trying to reconnect with him. But a few comments on Facebook. Tonight, this one from Simon Yang says, I'm watching you live from Techiman in the Bono East, and I'm enjoying the conversation. This one from Tofik says, hi, good evening to you, Sam. Robert Ewusi is also watching us tonight, and he says, I'm enjoying the conversation. And this one from Abigail is also watching us this evening. She says, I'm enjoying the historical perspectives that your guest is giving us. Very, very informative. Final one before I come back to the lines is that one from Emmanuel. Ima says, a very, very interesting conversation. I'm really enjoying the perspectives. Let me quickly try and see if I can make contact with Professor John Gachi and continue from the commerce bit of the conversation. Prof, if you can hear me, good evening and welcome to the conversation.
Good evening.
I'm hoping you're doing well.
By the grace of God.
It's good to have you on the show tonight. So far, following the conversation, seeing the figures that are being thrown at us, some 100 million, some $139 million. What do you think is the main objective economically for the presence of the Vice President of the United States of America?
Well, I think we do know that the American economic fortunes is not centered on one particular activity. It's centered on what happens across the globe. And what is happening right now is just to quickly try to consolidate some grounds with Africa, and in particular with Ghana, and then try to impose in a subtle way some of the values that is being respected in America, like the LGBTQ plus and so on and so forth. That was part of the reason why the
Oh, it looks like we're still having some challenge with the link of Professor John Gachi, but we'll try and reconnect with him so he shares his
US Vice
thoughts
President
with us.
Ghana
We'd like to make
is
sense
to
of
use some support. The countries that they have. Hello?
Yes, I'm here with you, Prof. Please go ahead. I can hear
The
you,
region,
Prof.
because now there is a scramble for African countries with the incursion by China, incursion by Russia. So I think they are working very hard to ensure that they maintain some countries within the region.
You made mention of the scramble for Africa. What are they scrambling for, if I may ask?
Well, it's like some African countries are likely to shift commitment to the West and increase their allegiance to Russia and China, and then perhaps find it attractive to the new bloc that is being built by Russia, India, and some of the Asian countries, including South Africa. So these are threats to allegiance to the West, and they are trying to work assiduously to reverse the trend. And then they are using things that are happening within the region as a way to provide support. Like you see the disturbances going on in the Sahel region and moving down to the south within the borders of Burkina Faso and Ghana. All these issues are things that are happening, and they are using those things to lend support and remain relevant to us. But the reality is that those money that are pledged will not come in 2023, may not come in 2024. They will remain a pledge, and then you will have to fulfill some conditions before those pledges are delivered. And one of the conditions is clearly the LGBT Q plus and the rest that we are talking about. And the Vice President didn't miss word. He made it very clear that he said that those things are human rights values that ought to be respected across board. And that has already started sparking some conversation in Ghana. So Americans have come here for their interests, but they will use our need to showcase that they are supporting us, but they are actually pursuing their goal.
She talks about support for innovation. She talks about support for entrepreneurship. She talks about support for women empowerment. Are these not things that are of significant importance to us as a people?
Yeah, they're important things. And then they also remain important things in the US. So it's not that he's raising issues that we are isolated about. The US need to deepen women participation in democracy, just as Africa needs to increase women participation in democracy. We want a lot of women to go through the educational system, just as America also needs that, except that we need some financial support to put in place the conduit through which women participation can be increased, the conduit through which women can attain to high level in education, the conduit through which women can get some skills that are meaningful. Yeah, that is true. But the point is that these developments are not isolated issues to Africa.
Now, the issue you made about the scramble for Africa, I was trying to make sense or wrap my mind around it, because here is the case, Ghana, for instance, that's a lot of the bulk of its trade with China and not the US of A. Even the US itself has a lot of its products coming from China, being manufactured in China and then brought back into their home country. And so if the US attempts to want to, let's say, plow back some of the gains that China has made in Africa, how would it do that, seeing that we are already doing a bulk of our trade with China?
Well, I don't think that the US is worried about our trade with China per se. But what the US wants is loyalty and commitment to the West. And that commitment is under threat. And that is what they are trying to salvage by this visit.
I'm trying to make sense of the threats that you speak of in terms of our loyalties and where they lie. Could you explain that further for me? Because I know that there are trade arrangements that are already there. I know there are bilateral agreements that have already been signed between either us and the Chinese and other European countries. These are existing agreements that are binding on us. And so our loyalties are not in question, are they?
It is in question. It is highly in question. I believe you should know the number of African countries that are cold towards certain policies of the US and the West. I believe you can take Ukraine crisis, for example, the number of African countries that decided not to be very open to what is happening, except Ghana, who went to the United Nations to show support against Russia, one way or the other. And then because of that, I think the US have to awaken and work very hard to ensure that that traditional loyalty is maintained and is salvaged. So if somebody says there is no threat to loyalty, I think the person might be making a big mistake.
Now, on the question of loyalty and considering where we stand with our economy, where the finance minister just recently went to China, if you and I know that this is all a move to ensure that the loyalties to the United States of America are not eroded, the Chinese would obviously know this. And so our effort at ensuring that our indebtedness to the Chinese, they either, loosen it a little bit for us, they restructure, or, they cut some away. Does this pose a threat for that conversation we're having with the Chinese when it comes to our effort at getting an IMF deal?
Well, Chinese know what they are about. They know the deal they have actually struck with the government of Ghana. They know the benefit that that deal will yield to them. They are aware of that. They know the significant contribution they have made to the economy of Ghana. At least we didn't get money from the US to build our gas plant. We didn't get money from the US to do a lot of our road projects. We got it from China and other parts of the world. So those are the realities. So China is also leveraging on this in the bargain process. I believe the finance minister didn't tell us what went on. We were only told that China has opened up, and then is very soon it will come on board. That's what we told. We don't know what is the bargain that the finance minister sent there. So these things are very clear to us.
All right. In summing up our conversation, what would $139 million, what
Hello?
would it do? Prof, if you can hear me, what would $139 million do for the Ghanaian economy if it were to come in 2024?
I didn't get the beginning of the question.
I was asking, what $139 million do for our country if it were to come even in 2024?
Well, it will do something, but very little. It will not solve our problem. But it comes with a lot of conditions. Have you ever heard Russia providing support to Ghana with the condition of ensuring that there is LGBT in the country, against the values of the majority of the people? Have you heard China providing loan capital to the country and attaching those things to it? So these are the things that we need to look at. So that money that is being provided, it looks small when you look at the problem we face. It will not come in one tranche. It will come in piecemeal. You have to do a lot of things before you qualify for it. You may sacrifice a lot before you qualify for it. So we appreciate the strong relationship between Ghana and the U.S. There is a lot of benefit in that relationship, in the educational system, in the diplomacy, in trade, in culture, and now we are also talking about tourism. It is great that those traditional relationships exist, but the conversation is now taking a notch higher.
Prof, in ending my conversation with you tonight, I would just want to veer off a little bit and help me out with the talk about capital adequacy issues to do with some banks that are deemed virtually going insolvent. I don't know if you've heard this, and the ratios that are being adjusted. If you have, what does that mean?
Well, I think the standard capital adequacy ratio, I think, is at 10%. That is normal. And a lot of banks hitherto were above the 10%. But the debt exchange program that was concluded eroded the capital base of some of the banks. And the thing is that because of the economic environment, two things are happening. One, majority of SMEs and individuals have become defaulters because of the interest rate regime we are operating. So it produced a lot of defaulters. Now that default, when it happens, the Bank of Ghana waits for 90 days, and when payments are not made, when they fall due on the loans of the bank, they are classified as non-performing, and you make provision out of it. So in order to understand this thing, I will only say that you have your capital base there, and there is a loan default, and then they debit the capital account for you, and then it is eroding as the non-performing loan increases. So it has made a lot of banks weak now as a result of the way the debts were treated as a result of the debt exchange program. And so I'm even surprised that if the governor of the Bank of Ghana, who is an advisor to the government of Ghana on monetary policy issues and how fiscal policy measures are having effect on the efficacy of the bank's activity, will also look on we're talking about fiscal measure of 5% on even the banks. The banks that have become fragile, we are now putting 5% levy on them before tax. So all these things, they create, multiple problem for the financial sector. So yes, it is true. The capital adequacy ratio is going down below the 10% for many other banks. So that is why the governor was raising the alarm. But the question is, somebody will say, now who caused them? You are saying that it is caused by the debt exchange program.
Prof, in summing up the conversation, just a quick one about this whole talk. There was supposed to be some stability fund. Is that not what it was meant to do?
Well, I'm not sure that most of the banks are minded to go to that stability fund because the regulatory structure is done in such a way that ordinarily the Bank of Ghana comes to the aid of financial institutions which are in trouble to provide what we call liquidity support. So they go to the Bank of Ghana, they take it at interest, pegged at the policy rate. Okay, so now interest rate is around 40%, but when you go, you take it at 29.5%, that is the policy rate. Or if the Bank of Ghana is minded, may lower it for them. But now, the government is saying that that structure is over. If you are interested in accessing that fund, you will now go through a vehicle called GAT. And the GAT indirectly would take the money from the Bank of Ghana and invest in you. And by so doing, acquire equity interest in you and also acquire preferential interest in you.
All right.
So these are the challenges. So I'm not sure unless some of the banks, the shareholders become so tired that they just want to even merge with other banks. If not so, the moment you go through that to access that fund, you have brought an investor within you immediately.
All right.
And I know that foreign banks are not minded about that because if they need capital, they will fall on their parent banks to support them. So they will never go to access that fund for anybody to be having shares in them. So the problem has to do with the domestic banks.
All right. Prof, we will thank you for making time to join us tonight via Zoom, as much as at some point we had some challenges with, the link, but I'm grateful. Professor Samuel Eshun also joined us tonight on the show, sharing some thoughts with us. Let me just read some few comments before we end the conversation. This one from Nachi Hat. Adam says, I'm watching the conversation and I'm enjoying the talk. It's quite technical, but still, it's making a lot of sense with respect to the intentions of the U.S. folks. This one also from Jifa says, I'm enjoying the conversation and you guys are making us understand their real intent for coming to Ghana. Let me read one final one and then we may end the conversation. Ni says that I'm following you guys and it's a very interesting conversation. Your guests are on point. And so, thank you to my guest tonight, Professor John Gachi, Dean of the Business School, University of Cape Coast, and then also Professor Samuel Eshun, KNUST Senior Lecturer, sharing some thoughts with us. Well, thank you for being a part of the show tonight. From the entire production team, we wish you a very fruitful and blessed evening. Good night.